Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kurt, and welcome back to Far Lands or Bust. That was a really deep, throaty bark from Wolfie there, wasn't it? But yeah, Wolfie's going through puberty, but we are back in Far Lands or Bust. This is episode 327. And I still am missing a heart of health from that little tumble I took in the last episode. We will remedy that in this episode at some point, I suppose. Might as well keep on our toes and full health for all eventualities, but regardless, today is Friday, February 14th, 2014. Like I said, episode 327, and still raising money for Child's Play charity over at farlandsorbust.com. $169,853.37 raised. A little bit of an update for this video, or this episode, whatever. Video episode, same thing. And you can keep giving. You can keep giving, like I said, over at farlandsorbust.com, and include in the comments section of your donation a question. Give me things, zombies. Give me zombies. Give me things to talk about on this long and perilous journey to the lands which are far, far away. A little bit of a programming note, I suppose I should mention. Well, maybe not a programming note, more of a technical note. This is the first episode of Far Lands or Bust where I am attempting, actually the first video on my channel, where I'm attempting recording in DxTory. For those of you who know anything about game capture and making YouTube videos from video games, this might mean something to you. If it doesn't, then just forget it. But I've been using, for the past 3 years, Fraps to record, and I've noticed it hasn't been updated since February of 2013. So, working on over a year since it's been updated. Not that that's a problem. Fraps still works. I still have it. Probably still use it when needed, but the fact that it hasn't been updated seems maybe the developers have moved on to other things. Like I said, it still works. I've never had a problem. No need to update it really, but decided to try out DxTory after all the things I've heard from other people using it. It's basically just another little bit. It's got a little bit more customization than Fraps is a little bit more plug and play, I suppose you could say. The thing about DxTory, I'm not sure if you'll notice any difference. Of course, if I hadn't pointed it out, you certainly wouldn't, but I'm sure now there's people who are searching for the differences. It might be a little bit better quality. And also, the thing is I'm able to record my audio, my microphone, as a separate track directly within DxTory. I usually, when I record through Fraps, record my microphone audio through a separate program entirely, and then later on remix it back together with the game audio, or the game and Skype or whatever other audio if I'm doing a collab or a co-op or something like that, which was always a little bit of an extra step and made things slightly complicated to make sure things synced up, but really not that big a deal. I've been doing it for the past 3 years, like I said, thereabouts. The first year or so, when I was still trying to figure things out, I had a different microphone, had a different setup, blah, 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 blah. But hopefully this works. I have also heard, being as it's slightly more complicated, I've heard stories from fellow YouTubers and Mindcrackers that they'll do a recording and then go back and be like, oh, dagnabbit, I didn't have my microphone recording set up, or, I didn't get the game audio and just my microphone. Can I borrow your audio? I've heard problems about that, and that's why I've been hesitant, but I've upgraded, and like I said, this is the first video. Hopefully it works out. I've done some tests and whatnot, so it seems like I've got the setup right, and I do want to thank a bunch of the Mindcrack guys for helping me out. I took the plunge, and they kind of shared with me their input and settings and things like that, but I just wanted to make a programming note there. Not that it really matters at all, and I'm not going to be answering your questions or telling you guys how to do it, because I'm just learning and I have no idea. So find out yourself. Use Google. But yeah, continuing on here. I have some news, some space news, I suppose. I remember I mentioned a couple weeks ago, well, it would have been like about 3 weeks ago, excuse me, that the Chinese moon rover. They had a lander and a rover land on the moon, and the rover was called U2. Not YouTube, but U2. Whoa, Wolfie! I'm trying to chop down a tree here, which means Jade Rabbit, apparently. Had some problems receiving orders from the ground to get prepared for the sunset on the moon, which, as you know, is 2 weeks long. 2-week-long nighttime period where the rover would go into kind of a safe hibernation mode until the sun rises again because it's solar powered. Didn't follow those commands, and they thought that perhaps because of that, the rover on the next sunrise would be inoperable and dead because it's not set up for the proper hibernation mode or the sun angle and stuff like that. Turns out, just yesterday, I believe it was just yesterday, they actually received, now that the sun has risen 2 weeks later, over the rover and the lander, they received a signal. It's kind of phone home signal, a waiting instruction signal, a very faint signal. It's all that they've got so far, but it may be that the U2 rover is not dead after all. Rumors of its demise have been greatly exaggerated. But we don't know. You know, this could just mean, okay, maybe perhaps its radio has survived and is doing its radio thing of phoning home after the sun rises, but if it hasn't set up properly or if it hasn't done the right things to keep its vital components in check for the long lunar nighttime, the rest of its systems might have problems. But we're certainly waiting and hoping and you know, waiting to see if perhaps the rover did survive to another day to get more science. Whoa, watch your step. Speaking of hearts, Wolfie, be careful. Yeah, I knew that was gonna happen. Oh, good lord. Good lord. Have a seat. Oh, you can't sit in water. Come over here. Boop. Ugh. Moo. Well, the cows are like, watch your step, man. All right, now you're full up. So we're going to continue on. Now we'll have to get some more pigs on the next time we see pigs. But yeah, that's very cool. A faint signal was received, so neat stuff. A little bit more robust of a robot than perhaps we initially thought. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an update about that. I suppose this kind of segue, this leads into a question I got from a donor, an anonymous donor to Child's Play Charity, asked, why don't satellites freeze in space? First of all, apparently I am now known as somebody who can answer science questions, so I'd better step up my game and actually do some research, which I did. But the question was, why don't satellites freeze in space? It's a good question, because space is cold. Obviously, the kind of sci-fi movie depiction of when a person is sucked out into the vacuum of space, they instantly freeze and die and whatnot. So you assume, well, how do satellites not freeze in space? And actually, you would be interested to find out that satellites have more of a problem with overheating than they do with freezing in space, because space is a vacuum, a relative vacuum. It's not necessarily absolute zero, because there is some stuff out there, but very, very few stuff. They think it's like 2 above 0 Kelvin, well, there's no below 0 Kelvin, but you get my point. Well, there is, but wibbly wobbly timey-wimey, that's not what we're talking about. So there is a little bit of stuff out there, but the way we know of freezing here on Earth is because of the atmosphere, the air. The heat is actually transferred to the molecules of air, and that's how we as animals and our electronics and cars will freeze, quote unquote, is all their heat gets dissipated out into the atmosphere. Since there's no atmosphere in space, there's no way to transfer the heat to. So actually, satellites have a problem with overheating, because even though there's no molecules, the only heat transfer there is generally through radiation, and you receive all that radiation from the sun. So that's why satellites have that kind of classic tin foil, that kind of yellow foil covering, or in the case of, say, the Space Shuttle or the International Space Station, they have that white thermal padding. It's basically like a blanket to deflect and dissipate the radiant heat coming from the sun. And I will actually, once the sun in Minecraft sets, I will try to explain that a little bit better. Not the expert here, certainly doing some Googles will turn up a little bit more detailed answers than I'm able to give, but I'll do my best. In the morning. And a thermal radiationists. Woof. Let's get a boat for this ride here, and then we can... Whoop, hey, oh no. There we go. Whoop, let's keep the compass out. Continue on. So yeah, it's kind of, the opposite of what you imagine. Satellites have problems overheating. That's why they have that foil-looking insulator. And also a lot of satellites, talking about, space science, NASA satellites that go out of Earth orbit and do a lot of deep space missions. When they're traveling, they'll actually do a little bit of a spin, a rotation, so that it equalizes the thermal heating and cooling. Because if you weren't spinning and only one side of your spacecraft was facing the sun and the other wasn't, that one side facing the sun would overheat, and the side facing away from the sun would freeze, or have no thermal transfer. So the slow rotation keeps an even temperature throughout. The satellites travel through deep space, so that's one of the reasons it does that. Specifically speaking, space telescopes, since they have a problem with overheating, they actually need to be kept cold. So instead of bringing, say, like a heater or anything up there, they actually bring coolant. So space telescopes, if you look up the, what was it called? I have it in my notes. The Herschel Space Observatory observes in the infrared, which if the telescope itself was heated, it would mess up the instruments, the very sensitive instruments that are actually looking at the infrared, the heat, the beyond the visual spectrum of light coming from deep space. It would actually mess up the instruments. So they actually have to have, the Herschel Space Telescope had liquid helium as a coolant, and once that coolant ran out, look at that stick sliding on the ice. Once that coolant ran out, the telescope essentially died and the mission was over. That was planned. They knew it was going to run out, and that's how they determined its lifespan as a telescope. But very interesting stuff to consider there. In terms of, like I mentioned, the space shuttle and the International Space Station, they actually have to have radiators on the outside. When a space shuttle would launch and got into orbit, one of the first things it would do would be to open its bay doors, its payload bay doors. And if you ever look at the inside of those doors, they actually were lined with the radiators, which would circulate, much like a radiator on your car works, would circulate I'm not sure about the space shuttle, but I know the space station uses liquid ammonia. It would circulate that liquid to cool the internal components from both launch, but also overheating, the batteries, the electronics, all that fancy-dancy stuff. It was news a little bit ago that the pumps, the ammonia pumps on the International Space Station failed and had to be replaced by spacewalkers. It's always a little bit dangerous because ammonia is quite toxic. So if there is ever an ammonia leak, they definitely have to make sure that they wipe that and keep themselves and the spacesuits clean before re-entering the airlock and stuff like that. So it's a very good question, and I really never considered that before that was asked. You kind of think about that. Yeah, it's like, why don't, how do satellites not freeze? And actually they have the opposite problem. Speaking of landers like the Mars rovers, those can freeze because, once again, they're on Mars. Mars has an atmosphere, however small and light it is, and they have a danger of freezing on Mars. So they actually have heaters, electric heaters, to keep their batteries and their electronics warm, specifically during the night and also during the seasons. Mars has seasons, has winter and summer, to keep themselves operating, which is what happened to the Spirit rover. Spirit and Opportunity are the two rovers that went down simultaneously. Opportunity is still going 10 years later, which is crazy. They had an initial lifespan of 90 days. But Spirit got stuck in some sand. One of its wheels was broken to begin with, and then it got stuck in some very fine-grained sand that it couldn't get out of, and it couldn't position itself towards the sun in order to maintain the battery level and the power to keep its heaters running. Its heaters failed, and then that's how the rest of the rover failed, and it is stopped there. But Opportunity is still plugging along. And of course, the Curiosity, the large rover currently, or the latest large rover down there, is actually not powered by solar power. It's powered by a nuclear power source, which itself generates heat and maintains the proper heat levels. It also, I believe, probably has a heater as well, because you don't really want to depend too much on the nuclear heat from the power source. I'm not sure what specifically how that system works, but yeah, that was a very good question. I should have had like Bill Nye on as a guest to answer that in a little pop-up window or something. But yeah, I just thought about that when I was mentioning the rover. Since there's no atmosphere, there is technically an atmosphere on the moon, but it's very tenuous, very barely there. Since it's in all intents and purposes a vacuum on the moon, the rovers and landers on the moon have the same heat problems as satellites in space, I believe. I don't know. That part I didn't research. How about you look that up on the internet and let me know in the comments? Haha, I'm giving you guys homework. Sorry, I apologize. But anyway, I had satellites freeze in space. Yeah, let me actually, I'm going back and forth here. Usually I start off with like news and just random talky stuff, and then I go to the questions, but I'm going to go back to news now. Turns out, you all know my trials and tribulations. Everybody has trials and tribulations with their internet service provider. I have Comcast, simply because I have no other choice in my location. Welcome to America. Yeah, this is like a very strange concept for non-Americans to have no choice in your internet or cable provider. Literally no choice, dependent on the location you live. But our good friends Comcast, the big news on the internet this week is Comcast wants to buy Time Warner Cable. Comcast is the #1 largest cable and internet provider in the United States. Time Warner is the #2. Literally. Talking about poop. The #2 cable and internet service provider. Comcast wants to buy them for $45.2 billion in stocks. And to compare that, just to compare the numbers, NASA's budget for 2014, the entire year, all the manned space flight, the astronauts, the rovers, the new satellites going up and launches and blah, 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 blah. The entire budget for NASA in 2014 is $17.6 billion. Whereas, like I mentioned, Comcast wants to buy Time Warner Cable for $45.2 billion. I'm not saying that Comcast should fund our space program. That's just kind of, I'm looking at a measure for the amount of money changing hands here, and how much, I suppose, to Comcast that is change between the cushions, although technically not, but you get my point. This is bad news, and everybody with a solid head on their shoulders knows that this is bad news. We all knew it was bad news when Comcast bought NBC, but that got its blessing from the FCC, and then some of the FCC members later on now enjoy new jobs at Comcast, which is just a marvel of democracy at work. So yeah, that's happening. Well, it has to be once again approved by the FCC, but and like I said, everybody and their mothers is like, this is a terrible idea. Why on earth would we be allowing them to do this? It's kind of scary because the current recently appointed FCC chairman, the FCC, for those of you who don't know, is kind of the Federal Communications Commission or something like that. They govern the communications companies, your telecom companies, They passed those laws. They are who blocked AT&T from buying T-Mobile. Of course, now Sprint wants to buy T-Mobile. Things like that. But the FCC, the new chairman, whose name is Tom Wheeler, before he got the job as the government FCC chairman, was a venture capitalist and head lobbyist for none other than the cable and wireless lobby in Washington, D.C. Whee! So, you know what side he's on. But regardless, Comcast is saying, oh, this will be good for consumers. And their excuse is it doesn't reduce competition because Comcast and Time Warner aren't competing with each other. And that's only because they've previously made arrangements that they won't compete. So, like, certain parts of the country only are able to get Time Warner cable, whereas the neighboring parts of the country are only able to get Comcast. So their kind of excuse is, it's not going to reduce competition because there's already no competition to begin with, which is just, and like I said, anybody with any sort of common sense is like, that's the opposite of the argument you should be making. It's such a headache. It's just terrible. As somebody who makes their living on the internet, it's a very scary thing indeed. And I will continue complaining about it in the morning. And Comcastards. That was another thing. I don't know if... When was that? That had to be in the early 2000s when net neutrality was going through the FCC and people were talking about how we need laws. Comcast, there were different, I suppose you could call them town hall meetings with the government officials and the FCC officials where regular old citizens like you and I could go and have our case heard to talk about net neutrality and keeping the internet free and open as it is, and Comcast, the story was, and why am I going up here? I don't think this is going to get me anywhere. Let me make a boat. Comcast actually at these meetings paid people off the streets, homeless people and otherwise, just random people. They paid them to fill the seats in these meetings so that people who actually were pro net neutrality couldn't attend. And they were known as the Comcastards, was kind of the blogosphere kind of named them. And it's a fairly regular practice in government, but it was just totally obvious. And it's like, why? Obviously, they're up to no good. They're paying just people to just fill the seats and not complain. I could go on, but regardless, it's just a bad thing all around. It's one of those things, I don't know, we can help have our voices heard, hopefully to like Congress people and whatnot, but then again, they're really not the people making the decision. It's a mess. But a news note to keep your eye on. And it's just boiling my blood. Speaking of heat transfer in space, I just have a problem with the cable companies, and it's just, and they're losing a bunch of customers who don't want cable anymore, like myself. I just have the most basic of cable plans because it's, they inflate their numbers by making it cheaper to bundle your cable and internet versus just having internet by itself. So they say, oh, look at all these cable subscribers we have. So I have the cheapest, but I think, one of the biggest problems I can see with cable and why people are leaving it is kind of on kind of the superficial surface level is an interface problem. Like, it's much easier to use a system like Netflix or just have video files on your computer, your YouTube, to find and watch the content you want versus cable. And even more recently, it used to be that you could plug in your TV directly to the cable and use your TV's up and down buttons. The television you buy comes with an interface designed by Samsung or whoever TV you buy to change channels and watch your different inputs and things. But then the cable company comes and they scramble the cable signal, so now you are required you're required to have a cable box. Even if, like myself, you have the most basic of cable, you're required to have a cable box, so you get one of their really crumbly laid out remotes, and you have this cable box. You know, you can't, you know, the time-honored tradition of flipping channels. You can't even do that anymore. You change the channel, you click the up button on the channel on your remote, you wait 5 seconds, and then finally the next channel loads up. And then you can't skip channels like me. I don't have all the channels. There's no way to program out the channels you're missing because they want to constantly remind you of the programs you're missing. So I can't just flip through around. I have to, you know, remember the channels, and there's no memory. It's a mess. They have the on-demand thing, but that's just terribly designed. You have these cable company people are definitely not user interface designers. You know, I feel like if they changed that, you know, that's why a while ago a lot of people really loved TiVo, because TiVo at its source was a software company. They just happened to make hardware that allowed you to plug into their TiVo system, and the system for recording and watching and skipping, you know, skipping ads and things like that was much preferable to the cable alternative, what the cable providers gave you. So I don't know, that's kind of my 2 cents. Regardless, they're up to no good. They're up to no good, see? And that's just something worth watching out for. It's just, I saw that news item and I'm like, well, there goes the neighborhood. Once again, you know, we had the SOPA thing. There's another thing trying to get through, fast-tracked through Congress. What is it called? I forgot what it was called already, because nobody talks about it because they're trying to do it secretly. You know, similar to SOPA, the copyright and, you know, restriction of the exchange of data and information. It's a mess, I say. But enough negativity for so long here. I do have a question from... Oh, I had the third question from last episode. I had a 3-part question coming from, who was it? Tofu Pup 2. The third question, he gave, I think it's a he, I'll just say it's a he. Watch it, Wolfie. They gave 3 separate donations in order to ask all their questions because they ran out of space in the comments field. The third question and final question from Tofu Pup was, it seems like a lot of people are going gluten-free for health reasons, even if they are not allergic to wheat or gluten. Do you think there's anything to this, or it's just some new agey pseudoscience? Well, certainly there's a lot of marketing involved, speaking of corporations. You know, it's a buzzword now. Gluten-free, gluten-free, gluten-free. Certainly it's, you know, the marketing people realize that if they put gluten-free on the packaging or offer a gluten-free alternative, that it's going to increase sales at some point, and that certainly influences buying habits. And yeah, I could see how some people, you know, see that as some sort of, instead of looking at the science behind it, they look at gluten. Since this is free of gluten, gluten must be a bad thing, so I should avoid things that have gluten, you know, kind of like your sugar-free or your high fructose corn syrup-free, you know, that sort of buzzword type of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely, if you don't have a gluten allergy or full-blown celiac, there is no dietary benefit of going gluten-free. In fact, there's some studies that show that it actually could cause more harm because you do miss out on certain vitamins in gluten-free, what's the word I'm looking for, diets, and also some and a lot of gluten-free alternatives end up, you know, without gluten is kind of the sticky, in terms of bread anyway, is kind of the thing that it's the glue that holds it together. So they're replacing wheat and gluten with sugars and other things that could actually cause opposite problems as far as sugars are concerned, and cholesterol peaking kind of problems. So you have to worry about that. But yeah, there could be a problem. You know, there's a lot of people are also linking it to, in children, mood behavior. although there's zero science that links those two things together, gluten and certain mood either disorders or simply just, oh, my kid goes crazy when he eats gluten. No, not necessarily. It's probably also because whatever foods you're giving him that include gluten also include sugars or you know, other things that change behavior, or it's perhaps just your own false positive, your kind of confirmation bias. Oh, he eats this, then acts like this afterwards. Well, it might just be because he's got energy now that he's eating that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I haven't looked into that because I don't have, nor do I want kids, so that's none of my concern. But the question continues. Do you think there's a side effect for people with legit allergies like yourself have more food choices at restaurants and stores because of the gluten-free fad right now? Yeah, I suppose for people who actually have an intolerance or full-blown celiac disease, it's a positive because now, like I said, certain restaurants are offering gluten-free menus or, you know, alternatives, whereas they wouldn't before without kind of the news and kind of the, as you mentioned, the fad behind it. So I would certainly not complain. And certainly things labeled as gluten-free have to adhere by certain FDA regulations. They, you know, which is why some, you know, in some cases food might be gluten-free, but they don't bother to put that on the label because it's actually, holy cow, I'm on a mountain and a half right here, because it's actually costs more to get that certification. So you really have to do your research, but dang it. And the clouds are rolling in, and the sun is also setting. I don't like this too much, but I think we're going to have to set up our hidey hole above the cloud limit for once. I'm sure that's happened before, but it's always, no, Wolfie, yeah, that's why. I gotta remember in the next episode when I wake up that, hey, you noodle, that this place is on the top of a mountain and not to just go barreling off the side there. I think I'll remember, and perhaps we'll have some clouds. Yeah, I think we're going to have some clouds maybe in the hidey hole. Some moisture, if you will, some condensation, some haziness, or maybe not. But yeah, let's block ourselves in here. But certainly, thank you very much, Tofu. What was it? Tofu Pup. Tofu Pup 2 for, yep. It's a nice plush carpeting. It's like an air mattress. Whoop, there goes that shovel. I guess I'll have to, you know what, let's make another shovel while we're at it. Yeah, thank you for those questions and those 3 very generous donations to Child's Play charity. And I apologize for getting all negative and kind of... Oh, hi, Wolfie. No, never mind. Let me actually do that, and I need to dig in one deeper here. God, this looks weird. I had no idea that, like, the clouds turned purple when it went nighttime. I'm like, ew, it's touching my foot. Get it off. What do I gotta do? I gotta make the beds. Whoop. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I might as well make a boat while I'm up here. Yeah. We'll have more positive, hopefully. Hopefully, there's better news and more positive things to talk about in the next episode of Far Lands or Bust. Oh, that looks weird. I just want it to go away. Be done. Just go away. That'll be interesting when that happens too. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed anyway this episode of Far Lands or Bust, and I hope everything, future me, I hope everything goes well with editing and this new recording software. That hopefully it only leads to better things and easier production and more higher quality content for those of you subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, why don't you subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button? Subscribe. Oh, there it goes. There goes the cloud. But yeah, this is creeping me out. So until the next time, have a good weekend. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Kurt. I will see you next time.